Yeah. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. To this day, my life is not the same because of it, and my relationship with my family isn't the same because of it. So I was in a relationship at the time, and this is when we had just started Be Glad, and I was just, this baby activist. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this. Didn't think of the ramifications of it, didn't think of the repercussions, didn't think of anything. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna do this, and I'm just gonna be fearless. And it is what it is. And we had a panel discussion. I think it might have been Be Glad's first panel discussion, actually. It was a panel discussion on LGBT pride, or something to do with LGBT discrimination and the Caribbean, something like that. So I knew this panel discussion was coming up, and I hadn't told my parents about me being gay, far less, about Be Glad. So I made the decision to call my mom and let her know. But I did it. We were at UE. The panel discussion was about to start, and I made a phone call. So I said, Mommy, I have something to tell you. And she was like, what? Are you pregnant? And I said, no. And she said, are you gay? And I said, yes. And she flipped out. She started to curse and yell and scream. And the panel discussion is about to start. So she's just like yelling and yelling and yelling on the phone. It was like, I couldn't even, decipher what she was saying. It was just pure, like, unfiltered anger. She was so angry. And so I ended the phone call, and she just kept calling and calling and calling. And then when she realized I wasn't answering, she started to send text messages. So I go into the auditorium to start the panel discussion, and I'm at the podium speaking, and I had notes on my phone, because I wasn't used to public speaking at the time. So, I had my little notes, and I looked down the phone, and these texts are coming through, just like violent, angry, like really volatile messages from my mother. And there at the panel discussion, the media is there, CBC is there, the newspapers there. I freaked out, and I just said, I can't do this. And I ran out of the room, and I started to cry. And that ended up on the news. It ended up in the newspaper. It was on, the CBC Evening News. And that night, after the panel discussion was finished, I went home, and it was just awful. It was awful. It was so bad. I knew that she wouldn't have a good reaction, but I did not think that it would be that volatile. She was just so angry, and I couldn't understand why she was that angry. I didn't know if she was that angry because I didn't tell her or what, but she was just so mad, and it went on for a long time. Then it became like, you're not welcome in this house, and I spoke to my father, and he cried. That was the first time I ever heard my father cry in my entire life. I was 19 at the time, and he cried, and I was like, I couldn't understand what was so bad. Like, I couldn't understand it. Then Be Glad, this is when we just started out, so we had an interview with The Nation. So they came to our home, and they did a really intrusive interview. And not knowing how to deal with the media at the time, I just answered all of the questions. It was like really personal questions about, when did I first find out that I was gay, and when was my first sexual experience, and all this really weird stuff. And it got back to my mother, and I think it was just a really shameful experience for my parents. It was really shameful because all they kept talking about was, they didn't sign up for this. And, everybody's going to be coming at them, and what are people going to say about their parenting skills? And it was just a complete shitstorm. Can I say shit? Yeah. It was just a complete shitstorm. It was awful. And that volatility went on for not even months, but like years. It completely affected my relationship with my parents. To this day, it's a little better, but I don't really have a relationship with them anymore. We used to be very close, and since then, it's just been torn apart. We speak on special occasions and stuff like that, but I grew up in a really Catholic household, strictly Catholic. And I think a year before I came out, my mother converted to some form of very intense Christianity. I think she's Pentecostal or something now. So it was mainly, religion was the major driving force behind it. And shortly after I came out, I went back to Trinidad because it was during the summer break. So my mother bought me a plane ticket and she was like, "You're coming home now." So I went home and I couldn't use the computer because they said that I was gonna, speak to gays on the internet. And I couldn't go out, I couldn't use my cell phone. And they carried me to speak to a pastor. And he told me that I was a devil's bitch. And he was like a really big anti-gay activist in Trinidad, and he was just like really intense. And I told my mother that is not something that I wanted to do, and if anything, we could go to counseling. And she took me to a church counselor who, then did the same thing. So it's really been religion that is that major driving factor of such vile homophobia and that vile reaction towards my sexuality. Yeah. I wouldn't say they're necessarily integral in the movement, but I think as a Caribbean society, the church has a lot of power, and whenever they speak about the community, it's always in a denigrating way. And I think even if you don't believe that it's right, or you don't believe that, it's correct, I think it's important for the church to speak out on homophobia. It's important for the church to speak out on hate. It's important for the church to speak out on marginalization against LGBT people. And I think it's really important because we always forget about that section of the community that are both queer and Christian. And there are a lot of people who have a really hard time reconciling their faith and their sexuality. And I think things like that can be really isolating for them because it becomes a situation where they feel like they have to choose, or even if you are in the church, you completely have to conceal your sexuality and you have to hide who you are. And, that just causes mental anguish and, all of those problems, a lot of mental health issues. So I think it's really important going forward for the church to actively say that these are the problems that the community is facing, and we don't support it. We don't support homophobia. We don't support violence. We actively don't condone, parents putting their queer children out of their houses because, these are real issues that LGBT youth especially go through. Homelessness, joblessness, discrimination, not just on domestic levels, but socially and institutionally. And I think it's really important because the church has so much power. I think it's really important that they come out and denounce these things, especially. Yeah. So, when somebody is gender nonconforming, or when somebody who people assume is female presents as masculine, or somebody who people assume is male presents as feminine, or takes on a lot of feminine roles, or, non-conforming gender stereotypes, people do assign a sexual orientation to that person. But with me, I'm really feminine presenting, and I go through a lot of femme invisibility where, I don't just have to come out once, I have to come out all the time, almost every day. And it is a privilege in that I could move through the world with a lot less hassle than, someone who is gender non-conforming. But at the same time, it's difficult, especially in navigating queer spaces. And as an activist, I think because I'm so feminine, sometimes I'm not taken seriously, and people tend to question my queerness a lot. And it's something that I've been going through for a long time. People questioning how queer I am, how dedicated I am to being gay and being a lesbian and, you know, just being under a lot of scrutiny that I don't think, you know, masculine presenting women have to go through within that space. And that's just within the, you know, space of activism and, you know, our LGBT counterparts. But for the most, to the general public, I am just another straight woman. And, you know, it's easy sometimes, especially now that I'm in a relationship with a man. So, and it's the first time that I've ever been in a relationship with a man. So it's easy to navigate through the world and being able to hold my partner's hand and, you know, just being carefree and feeling light and being like, oh my God, this is so much easier than it was with my female partners. I don't have to, you know, look over my shoulder or, you know, hear those people passing by in the street saying things or people looking at me. I just get to exist and be normal and be happy. But it is frustrating when I have to constantly reaffirm my queerness and I have to fight for that space and I have to fight to claim that space. So that is frustrating. It really is.
I want to go back to Caribbean to you.
What does it mean to be Caribbean? What does it mean to be Caribbean? To me, being Caribbean is not necessarily something that I could encompass into words, but it's a feeling. So being Caribbean is both pleasure and pain, you know, because being Caribbean comes with a really rich culture. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, so that means, you know, food, music, steel pan, you know, diversity, religious diversity, you know, just a huge melting pot of people. You know, our dance, our language, just who we are. I think we're like nobody else in the world, really, as a region. But it's also a sort of bitterness that comes with being Caribbean because of the pain we've had to go through as a region, and sort of examining the past that we've had with colonization and the remnants of that we still have to live with today, you know? And, you know, we've just sort of been left with it, and we've had to sort of dredge through those feelings on our own and decide what to do with that pain, what to do with that history, what to do with those feelings. And we've been making it through, not necessarily in the best way, but I think we can't really be at fault for that because it's not something that we necessarily asked for. So I think we're making do as best as we can. But I love being Caribbean, I really do. I love being Trinidadian, yeah.